Okay, let's go ahead and go to our third section here, a new way of thinking, the birth of modern science. So hopefully this will load all the way. So what we're going to have is we're going to have the scientific revolution that's going to pop up. And so what's going to actually lead to that is going to be the Protestant Reformation. So the Protestant Reformation is going to show us that the church is wrong, that it is, this kind of goes along with it. The church is wrong. We know that it's wrong. Martin Luther showed us the way. And then we have the printing press, which is going to really facilitate that. It's also going to facilitate a lot of other learning. So the scientific revolution is going to start in Europe. And you kind of wonder why it's starting in Europe, because really, if you think about it, Islam would have been the place that it would have started with all their advancements in science and in math and in medicine. Usually Asia is kind of more what we're thinking when we're thinking of that too. But really Islam is kind of our primarily, they're usually the ones that are the forefront in all of that. But it starts in Europe. And so our question is, why Europe? Because that isn't really a likely place. Well, after the Reformation, and with the use of the printing press, we are going to start seeing more and more books published. We're going to see more and more universities pop up. They're going to be studying Greek texts. This is going to give rise to a very safe place for people, all of these universities. They're going to think beyond religion. They're going to start using rational thought and reason. And so that's going to be kind of a big deal. We're going to see that happen. And because of that, you're constantly fostering that education. And so that is going to really push the scientific revolution right on into the Enlightenment. This is going to show us a different separation between religion and state. Because of the Peace of Westphalia, that's definitely going to be on your test. So because of the Peace of Westphalia, basically remember the 30 Years' Wars when everyone was fighting over what religion, who's going to have what religion, and the Peace of Westphalia stops that, and they sign that to end the 30 Years' War, and also that it grants people where everybody can have all the rulers can decide what religion is going to be the main focus of their country. Well, a lot of people don't necessarily want religion to be the main focus. They want logic and reason and rational thought to be, because they realize that by using this, they're learning more, their society is progressing. And honestly, if you want your society to progress, you need to focus on education and learning. And they know this and they're using it. So, science is going to become a cultural revolution. It isn't going to be just a scientific revolution in terms of science, but you're going to have a revolution in the way of thinking. So here are some of our big players. So we have the heliocentric theory because of Nicholas Copernicus. He's going to bring that about and say, hey, the Earth is not the center of the universe. It is not a geocentric theory. It is a heliocentric theory. And then Galileo Galilei is going to take another step further and say we don't just orbit in circles, but in ellipses. So it's an elliptical orbit. And so that's also going to be something new. And then we also have Isaac Newton's laws of gravity. So this part here should be a little bit of review, but that's kind of who we're dealing with and some of our big people. So what is revolutionary about the scientific revolution? The revolutionary part is going to be the fact that people are thinking differently. They're going to take that revolution. They're going to not necessarily fight people, but fight ideas. They're going to fight some of the things that they had previously known as fact. And that's going to be a whole different ballgame, and it's going to lead into even more. So let's look at this. Kepler said that the machine of the universe is not similar to a divine animated being, but similar to a clock. What does this mean? And I do want you to pause this, and I want you to actually think about that and watch it and read it. So when you look at it, hopefully you realized that Kepler was saying that the universe isn't necessarily just some God putting this together, but it's more similar to a clock, where you have things that are perfectly working and that things can be mathematically figured out, and that it is more the workings of a perfect clock and less of a divine being. So How are we going to get to that point? Well, we have two scientists, Francis Bacon and Rene Descartes, and these two are going to come up with a scientific method. Now, this is something that we all use every day anyway. Well, not every day necessarily, but we all use it quite a bit. So, Francis Bacon and Rene Descartes are going to say, look, we're throwing all these ideas out here, but now we need to start proving some of these ideas. Don't just say them, but prove them. Come up with your observation, your question. How is this? Do your research. Come up with your hypothesis. Test it over and over and over and over again. Analyze your data, and then report your conclusion. With that is going to bring about one of the biggest revolutions ever in science. We're going to see that even more again later, when science is constantly moving forward, which is exactly what we want. Here's an AP tip, pro tip. European religion did not encourage, so that's like Christianity, did not encourage advancements in science like Islam did when they had their conflict of science and religion. Islam is going to go ahead and say, oh, wow, yeah, we're going to really promote this learning in science, whereas Christianity did not, because some of it went in the face of Christianity, and they didn't want to be told they were wrong at the time. So what's going to happen here? So we're going to have science is going to lead to the Enlightenment. Because if we're thinking about all of these things differently and we're like, that's different. That's not what I thought it was. Wow, this is going on out in the world. And we come up with the age of reason because of this. Because people are now finding problems and using these problems and struggles as a mode of progress. They're really focusing on, if this is a problem, how do we fix it? This is what's going on. Why? So they really start kind of pushing themselves forward based on the conflict and struggle. The Enlightenment is also going to apply the ideas of natural laws to human affairs rather than the physical universe. So that's going to be also a big thing. So let's look here at the philosophers of the Enlightenment. This painting shows French philosopher Voltaire, one of my favorites, with a group of intellectual luminaries at the summer palace of the Prussian King Frederick II. Such literary gatherings, sometimes called salons, were places of lively conversation among mostly male participants, and they became to be seen as kind of an emblematic of the European Enlightenment. Now, women did not just not participate. A lot of times they would hold teas and invite a lot of the same people, and then they would also partake in the lively conversation. Here is from a little something from Voltaire. This little globe, nothing more than a point, rolls in space like so many other globes. We are lost in its immensity. Man, some 5 feet tall, is surely a very small part of the universe. One of these imperceptible beings says to some of his neighbors in Arabia or Africa, listen to me, for the God of all of these worlds has enlightened me. There are 900 million little ants like us on the earth, but only my anthill is beloved of God. He will hold all others in horror through all eternity. Only mine will be blessed. The others will be eternally wretched. Now, what he is saying here is, it's the idea of how can we take something that appears one way and say that we are the only ones who have the right answer. He was applying it to religion here and saying, the Christians are like, well, your religion is wrong, your culture is wrong. But they really used it in so many different ways. And honestly, true, because religion itself, especially Christianity, is going to go through its own challenging times based on reason. So think about the Salem witch trials. People thought that they should interpret the Bible literally, and then they began to have extremism in Christianity. This was actually called their enlightened religion. So when religious figures start to think that they're enlightened, this is also going to prompt a little bit of craziness. So we end up going from faith being the center of everything to reason. Now, don't be mistaken. Just because these scientists were out there does not mean that they all were atheists. They were not. They were not atheists. Not all of them. Some of them, there are two types of scientists, and some of them are the kind of people that the more they look into science, the more they don't believe in a God. And then there are people that look into science, the more they realize that there is a God. These are the two different types of scientists that we have. Also, the same two type of philosophers and people who are big into science and the Enlightenment. So, what else goes on in the scientific revolution? Something that's kind of interesting is in Europe, they really embraced all of this new science. And they did not do so in the Asian countries. So, because of science, science is going to equal a lot of the death and destruction because they don't look at the sciences and medicine the same way that Europeans do. Japan is not going to adopt any European methods until forced by the West to open their borders. That's going to happen. Remember, Japan closed their borders. Who did they open them for? One country and one country only, and in one port. That was the Dutch. Correct. Hopefully you said that. So the Dutch are the ones that they're going to open up to. But Matthew Perry, Commodore Matthew Perry, not the actor, is going to show up in Japan with a nice little letter and say, in some big boats and some big gunboats, and say, hey, you guys are going to trade with us or we're going to come back and kind of blow you off the map. And so they opened up their borders. But that ticked them off enough that it definitely pushed them. The conflict is definitely going to, conflict and struggle are going to push them to progress as well. So let's look ahead. Science is constantly progressing, and that's what we want. So because of this, you're going to see people like Charles Darwin on The Origin of Species is what he wrote. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, not the most intelligent ones, but the most responsive to change. Things are always changing. They will always change. And so it's kind of like we have to understand that and embrace it in order to be part of that survival. Karl Marx saw himself as a scientist studying the struggle of classes. To him, that is what he saw. So to him, he was a scientist. So all of these people see themselves as scientists. Charles Darwin did. He was. Karl Marx considered himself a scientist because he was studying struggles of classes. Sigmund Freud, he applied the scientific techniques to the operation of the mind. So he did use the scientific method. He is also like the father of modern psychology. So what's going to happen and what are we going to see? We are going to see science continually. People are always finding new things. So the cool thing is you can't know everything in science. You can't really know everything in anything. But there's still so much for us to learn in science that it's really such an open field. So the next phase we saw and the next place we see is like science beyond Stephen Hawking. We see all of these people just continually progressing. So science is a pretty cool field. So that is the end of section 3.